Ad Astra is a film which explores the deeply personal journey of navigating pain and resentment in the absence of love and acceptance. The vast, isolated setting of outer space illustrates the depth and complexity of the human condition within the abyss of the unexplored subconscious mind. The title is taken from the Latin phrase Ad Astera per aspera, meaning through hardship to the stars, symbolizing our capacity to find peace and resolution through the confrontation and acceptance of our deepest fears. The film explores this mythological motif through the character of Roy McBride as he journeys to the edge of known space in search of his father, Clifford McBride. However, it is Roy's psychological journey that drives the narrative as he attempts to reconcile his conflicting emotions of resentment and anger with the unconditional love he still holds for his father. When Roy was 16, Clifford left he and his mother on a mission to find extraterrestrial life on the outer reaches of known space, leaving an emotional scar within Roy that has prevented him from developing meaningful and genuine relationships. Consequently, Roy is haunted by memories of regret around his failed marriage and the deep fear of becoming the unloving, isolated figure that his father has embodied, should he fail to reconcile his own anger and resentment. The film also explores humanity's yearning for meaning and purpose through the character of Clifford and his relentless and unwavering search for extraterrestrial life. The symbolism of this theme intertwines and collides with Roy's psychological journey, illustrating the desperate and isolated striving which characterizes the search for love and meaning. Roy works on the International Space Antenna, a giant structure protruding from Earth and pointing towards the stars, symbolizing his emotional detachment from humanity and serving as a metaphorical bridge between human connection and the beckoning abyss of bitter isolation. At the outset of the film, therefore, Roy exists in a state of limbo, and his journey is established not only as a physical one, but also as a psychological traversal of his own inner demons and the very real potential for his descent into darkness and void. Following an explosion on the antenna which leads to the death of his colleagues and his own near-fatal fall, Roy questions his inability to feel anything, emphasizing his emotional detachment. Yet, it is this event early on in the film which serves as Roy's mythological call to adventure, the abyss beckoning him from above to look to the stars, to begin his journey into the unknown. The US Space Command fear that the recent explosions are being caused by power surges resulting from experiments conducted by Roy's father Clifford, who led the failed Lima project decades earlier. Roy is tasked with traveling to Neptune, the location of the Lima project, to determine whether Clifford is still alive and to attempt to prevent further surges which could have catastrophic consequences for humanity. This apocalyptic potentiality emphatically mirrors the crucial significance of Roy's own imperative to save himself from the path of inner turmoil and resentment by confronting his father and preventing his own impending descent into bitterness. Throughout Roy's journey, we hear haunting internal monologues guiding us through his ruminations laden with fear, regret, and pain. His sense of detachment is punctuated by the film's sparse dialogue, emphasizing Roy's emotional void through the use of poignant silence and scenes of isolation. In one scene, Roy is faced with the primal rage that simmers in his subconscious as his crew come across escaped research baboons on an abandoned ship and he is forced to fight one off. This confrontation presents Roy with a symbolic image of the potential for his descent into darkness and malevolence should he allow his rage to consume him. This encounter, however, instigates Roy to confront his own anger and suffering during a psychological evaluation as he reflects upon his father's abandonment and his own fears of becoming the detached, callous man that his father is.
I've seen that rage in my father. I've seen that rage in me. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be my dad.
When the crew arrives on Mars, Roy is tasked with sending a recorded message to the farthest reaches of space in an attempt to make contact with Clifford, the physical distance highlighting the emotional disconnect between them. In this poignant scene, the piercing spotlight of attention highlights Roy's vulnerability and discomfort as he is examined from behind a screen, emphasizing his pain and emotional isolation, having not spoken to his father for decades. However, rather than retreating into the comforting embrace of detachment and indifference, Roy embraces his vulnerability and decides to go off script, recalling positive childhood memories spent with his father and tells him that he hopes they can reconnect. It is this moment of raw emotional truth that eventually instigates a response from Clifford, suggesting that imbuing our words and actions with truth and openness has the potential to lead us towards inner salvation. Clifford's obsession with his mission has led him to view all else, including human life, as expendable, as Roy uncovers a chilling revelation that Clifford has murdered his crew in an apparent mutiny attempt. In a foreboding piece of imagery, Roy feels the pull of his own anger and bitterness as a result of his father's looming shadow, illustrating the potential for his own descent into malevolence should he fail to confront and reconcile his anger and resentment. As Roy finally arrives at the Lima Project space station, he finds Clifford isolated and alone. In perhaps the most profound moment of the film, Roy is seen looking up to his father who stands high above him, symbolizing the elevated status Roy had projected onto him throughout his life. Clifford's despondent and unfeeling response upon seeing his son for the first time in decades reveals the extent of his emotional detachment and bitterness, and serves as a piercing confirmation of the deep fears Roy harbored regarding his father's rejection.
I never cared about you or your mother or any of your small ideas for 30 years. I've been breathing this air, eating this food, and I never once thought about home.
Yet upon hearing his resentful, malicious words, Roy swiftly rises up to his level to look his father in the face, perhaps now seeing him as a flawed and lonely individual, rather than the hero figure he had assumed him to be.
So I abandoned my son.
I still love you, Dad.
For Roy to not only feel, but indeed state his love for his father in the face of such apathetic rejection, rather than succumbing to the wounds of resentment and anger, is a powerful manifestation of genuine compassion and true, unconditional love. This act of courage signifies Roy's confrontation and acceptance of his father's darkness, thus allowing him to transcend his own impending bitterness and rage. In a simple moment of compassion, he extinguishes the looming shadow of his father's spite with his own love, forgiveness, and grace. Clifford's behavior shifts as a result of Roy's disarming expression of love, perhaps moved by the depth of his son's compassion in the face of his own unrelenting maliciousness. He eventually agrees to go with Roy, and during their final scene together, Clifford tries to release himself from his son. They struggle in the darkness and void, serving as a poignant metaphor for Roy's realization that in this universe, perhaps the only thing we have is indeed each other. In an unexpected moment of tenderness and understanding, Clifford urges Roy to let him go, which he does, both physically and emotionally, finally allowing Roy to achieve the closure he needed. Roy may have failed to physically rescue his father, but perhaps in another sense he did save him. In his final moments, Clifford felt the presence of true compassion and love in a brief moment of genuine connection with his son. Roy, however, returns to Earth now imbued with a newfound desire for human connection, having confronted and reconciled his resentment and anger. His journey into the unknown allowed him to achieve a shift in perception of what is truly important in life. Ad Astra reminds us that although life may present us with legitimate reasons for anger and resentment, there is nothing for us at the end of that path except the dark void of bitterness and isolation. The film implores us to cherish those around us, as we might just become the beacon of hope for each other amidst the darkness, as all we really have in this universe is each other.